Welcome everybody to the Rural Electric Cooperative Co-lab. My name is Tom Llewellyn. I'm the Executive Director with Shareable. We're partnering with the Rural Power Coalition to host this education series. This is the second event out of 8. Thank you to everybody who's able to join us for a second week in a row. We appreciate having you and hope to see you again. Today, we're going to be hearing from not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 folks in this session. So this is going to be a packed house. We'll be focusing on cooperative governance and scorecards. We've got Kyle Crider from the Alabama Interfaith Power and Light, Bree Nisley from Appalachian Voices, Deborah Opie from the Georgia Conservation Voters, Chris Woolery from Mountain Association, and Erik Hatlestad from CURE, who are all going to be presenting today. There's going to be time for questions probably throughout. I think people are going to pause for questions, and then we'll probably have a little bit of time at the end as well. So please drop your questions in the chat, and we'll be moderating from there. We're recording this session. We'll be sharing the recording. We'll also be sharing the slides and a transcript as well. We're also gathering all these materials in our community canvas, which is kind of a learning management system. So if you miss anything, you can go back and capture the recordings or any other links in there. So we're going to start off today hearing from Bree. Bree, are you ready to go?
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming back after our first session last week. Today, we're going to focus on scorecards, and that's why you're here. So we have a few things to cover. One, we're going to talk about what it means to be a member owner of a co-op. We're also going to talk about good governance. What does it mean for an electric cooperative to have good governance? And then we're going to spend some time with the many folks who are panelists on today's session talking about co-op scorecard projects that have happened in different parts of the country, how those have been used for accountability and transparency at co-ops, kind of what the process was for putting those scorecards together, and what some of the outcomes were as well. So we'll have 3 case studies for you all, and then we will also have some time for Q&A at the end. So wanted to kind of take some input from the crowd here on what it means to be a member owner of a co-op. So if y'all want to just answer in the chat, that would be great. What do y'all think it means to be a member owner? And I know there are folks coming from organizations and some people who are attending that are member owners of co-ops. We welcome responses from everyone. Thanks, Emily. To have a voice and power. Megan says number 4, which I think means autonomy and independence. Organizing and coordinating community efforts and resources. That's great. A chance to elevate more local energy options. You can vote for board members or run for the board. That's totally true. You can have a voice on how your co-op is run. Some influence, but it also means that people have to get involved. That's a really great point, Joanna. Having decision-making power and a say in where we get our electricity. Yeah, these are all great responses. So yes, members are the folks who pay their electricity bill to an electric co-op. If you're a member, it means you get a vote on who is leading your electric cooperative. So you get to vote for your board of directors. It also means that the co-op itself, the leadership at the co-op, have a responsibility to keep you informed and how you can participate in the co-op, and also make sure that the co-op is implementing programs and policies that are responsible to the membership, responsive to the needs of the community. So it's kind of a two-way street to be a member owner. You have rights and you also have responsibilities for how to get involved. And it often takes a lot of engagement from member owners to get active in their co-op and to start working democratically within the electric co-op. All right, now that we've done that, I want to do a little activity, and I'm going to stop sharing for a second and pop a link into the chat. Hold on one second. Want to have folks take a look at their bylaws or a website of an electric cooperative near you. So if you don't have a member handbook, member owners should have some kind of handbook that has the bylaws of their electric cooperatives written into it. You can get these at your co-op office when you go to pay a bill. You should be able to ask and get one of these. They're often distributed at annual meetings of the members that happen once a year. So if you have one of these on hand, maybe you keep this in your bedside table as a very active and engaged member owner. If you have one of these on hand, pull it out. If you don't have one, try checking your electric cooperative's website for the bylaws. If you are not a member owner of an electric co-op, you can check out the member directory that I just linked in the chat here, and select a distribution. Under type, select distribution, and then choose your state, and you can find a whole list of the distribution electric cooperatives in your state, and then click on a website there. But anyways, the activity I want to do is I want to ask folks to open up their bylaws, or if you're not a member owner, search on the website of an electric cooperative in your state to see if your board meetings are open. And so for this electric co-op, which is the Powell Valley Electric Cooperative in Northeast Tennessee, I can flip to a section in these bylaws about meetings of directors. And in here, I can find a notice about the board meetings and see whether or not it says the notice of the board meetings has to be publicly posted and whether or not member owners are allowed to attend. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and drop a prompt into the chat. But basically, it'd be great if all of the folks who are participating here can pick a co-op and either look to see if this information is on the website or look to see if information about the board meetings is in the bylaws and whether or not it says member owners can attend. Thank you, Leah, for responding. Did you find that? Maybe respond to your chat there and tell us whether you found that on the website or found that in the bylaws. Okay, I see Crescent said that PEC is open to everyone annually. I'm not sure which co-op that is, but that is cool. It sounds like that may be in reference to the annual meeting, and I'm wondering if folks can find information about the monthly meetings. Okay, I'm seeing that from Leah too. It's an annual meeting. So that might be helpful for folks to know, is that there's an annual meeting that happens once a year where member owners can vote for their board of directors and vote on other issues at the co-op. And then there are monthly meetings that the board of directors have regularly. And we're looking to see if those are open. Cool. So you all are doing a little bit of research right now that is similar to the research that we did in several of these scorecard projects. So I'm going to stop with this part of the collab and pass it off to my colleagues who are going to present on the scorecard projects that we all.
Erik's coming up first.
All right, thanks everyone. So I want to talk a little bit about, now that we've gone over what some of the rights and responsibilities are as a member owner, I want to talk a little bit about what good governance is. So, there's been a lot of conversation over the last several years in particular around the country with people who care about electric cooperatives about what good governance is. But good governance of cooperatives of every type, from grain cooperatives to food cooperatives to your neighborhood cafe worker cooperative, any cooperative is always having big conversations about what governance is and what good governance is. Everything from how votes are cast to eligibility to run for the board to how information about the cooperative's operations are shared with members. So it's a big conversation, and as you'll find out, there are a lot of different opinions in between from industry to industry, from the work we care about on electric cooperatives. There's going to be a big difference of opinion from organization to organization, region to region, about what exactly good governance means. So, with a growing conversation around the needs for growth and evolution of the electric cooperative kind of model of governance in the 21st century to better serve member owners, largely driven by conversations like the ones that many of you are having around the country in your communities and with your cooperatives. Several years ago, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, or NRECA, pulled together a governance task force to start thinking, to bring cooperative leaders together to start thinking about this exact question. What is governance? What are some of the challenges facing cooperatives? What are some of the areas of failure, room for improvement? What are some central kind of central values and best practices that cooperative leaders can be thinking about around the country? And they pulled together a 74-page report, which I'm going to link for you all in the chat. It's a very robust report, takes a look at a lot of different questions that many of us have been talking about for a long time. But essentially, they also ask the same question, what in our minds is good governance? And what they came up with is the task force believes that the electric cooperative good governance means having policies, practices, and culture to facilitate member engagement in and democratic control of the cooperative, fiduciary oversight of the cooperative's operations and structure, achieving the cooperative's vision, mission, and goals, and acting with integrity, transparency, accountability, and courage. So, for those of you who have been looking and thinking about cooperatives and their governance practices for a while, maybe that surprises you, maybe that doesn't. But I share this to say that this is many of the shortcomings that many of us are concerned about around the country are well known to leaders in the cooperative world, as they're well known to us. So, as we think about these, opportunities for continued improvement, both in terms of what our kind of specific values are around what we think good governance is, we then need to ask ourselves, what are some of the specific practices that get us there to some of what we kind of view broadly as good governance. In a few moments, you'll hear a little bit more about how some organizations around the country have taken a look at different transparency pieces, different ways that co-ops are sharing information with their member owners about elections and a variety of other things. But even amongst the organizations in the Rural Power Coalition, we may have some differences of opinion on what specific governance practices are better in our community than others. For some of you, you may really think that proxy style voting, where a single person can essentially collect votes from their community members and present them as if they are, and as they're voting on their behalf. Some of you may think that is a undemocratic practice. Some of you may think in your community that makes it really convenient for your member or your community members to participate in an election and governance. Some folks like only having board elections happen at the annual meeting, while others prefer to have elections happen over time, by mail, through online. So essentially, this is a long way of saying, there may not necessarily be one correct answer that can be applied across the country for one, what is good governance, and two, what are the specific practices that we'd all like to see in our communities and, applied everywhere. So I wanted to give us a chance, if we could pull up the whiteboard here, Tom, to post and share a little bit about what good governance looks like to us, what it looks like in our community, what specific practice you feel makes a cooperative in your community a really effective at communicating information or involving member owners in governance. So if you see the whiteboard on your screen here, you can go over to the sticky note option on the left side of your screen on the toolbar. and then you'll be able to drag over, whatever colored sticky note you'd like. We're not color coding anything here. And just share a little, share maybe one or two things that, you think in your cooperative really really is a great example of good governance. Just so we can see some of maybe the similar opinions from people around the country, and maybe we have a lot of differing opinions among the participants in this session here. So we'll give everyone a couple minutes to do that. All right, thanks everyone for starting to chime in here in the sticky notes. Easily accessible information on election processes. Absolutely. I certainly, I think that's a pretty, that should be a pretty universally held opinion. It's important for people to be able to understand how to participate in their cooperative elections. Having bylaws in mind, open discussion, and allowing people to specialize in differences, that's awesome. Opportunities to educate member owners and what it means to be a member owner on a regular basis. I think that's great. Regular cooperative education would be really, really important. Clear bylaws, bylaws are so hard to read sometimes, especially if they haven't been updated for a long time, that's for sure. Yeah, I like what someone's writing right now. Doing the specific outreach to new members and non-members, absolutely. Well, I feel free to keep on typing here, but we've got a lot to cover in the rest of the meeting. But so I just wanted to go through this kind of exercise here, to have us think about, that there is really, no universal practice that we can really say every co-op must do XYZ things no matter where they are across the country. And I think that is one of the big strengths of cooperatives and the cooperative movement, is that they can be responsive and flexible to their local communities, to their member owners, as long as they are actively engaging that membership. So I think that's really exciting. I think it's also important to think about, as we look at how cooperatives are dealing with adopting to new changes and kind of evolving and improving how their governance works. At the end of the day, many of these people who would be tasked with implementing these different tasks and these different practices are also just also community members. They're local folks generally living in your community. Oftentimes with smaller cooperatives, they're maybe working 2 or 3 different roles that in larger organizations would be handled by multiple people. So not only is this a big job and a big conversation, but it's also extremely difficult and time consuming to implement. So thanks everyone for contributing some of what you're thinking about when it comes to good governance. With that, I will pass it over to Kyle and Kyle alone.
Hey folks, I'm Kyle Crider. I'm the Program and Policy Director for the People's Justice Council, or since I'm going to be talking a lot about my home state of Alabama, Alabama Interfaith Power and Light, which is both the program of PJC and a chapter of National IPL. I'm putting our vision and mission in the chat rather than boring you with it, and allow me to introduce my co-presenter on this topic, Mr. Chris Woolery.
Hey, thanks, Kyle. I'm Chris Woolery. I'm the Energy Programs Coordinator for the Mountain Association in Berea, Kentucky. And I'll pass it back to Kyle to talk about electric co-op scorecards and why some of our groups chose to participate in them.
Thank you, Chris. Well, a few years ago, Bree and Chris and the whole RPC team um, reached out to me and People's Justice Council and gave us this marvelous opportunity to participate in developing an electric cooperative scorecard for Alabama. And so we want to talk to you not just about Alabama, but the Southeast in particular, and the whole reason behind electric cooperative scorecards. I mean, you've heard in the previous session some of the history of co-ops. They were formed in the 30s and 40s, but have unfortunately largely drifted from their mission. Next slide, please. And so in order to get a handle to see where we are before we can move us toward where we need to be, and this is the big royal we, y'all, this is all of us. Bree and the whole team came up with the scorecard concept, and it is all about measuring, establishing a baseline for purposes of course, accountability. But it's not just accountability from the current powers that be. So many times we see the familiar good old boy network governing these entities. We want to activate member owners because, like the marvelous learning opportunity I had a while back, this thing called We Own It. As I hope you all know by now, if you were a member of a rural electric cooperative, you are an owner, and it is so much easier, y'all, to change a rural electric cooperative than to say go through a state public utility public service commission and try to change a behemoth like Alabama Power or Georgia Power. Y'all, and full disclosure, I'm not a member of a rural electric cooperative personally, but of course my organization, Alabama Interfaith Power and Light, and the People's Justice Council is very concerned about this rural power panoply. So we want to activate member owners, build awareness of these problems, and y'all get folk to run for office, because once we know where we are, we know what we need to change. Slide, please. We're going to be going over some case studies, but let's focus on the Southeast Electric Co-op scorecards that are housed at this marvelous website, Energy Democracy, y'all. And if someone wouldn't mind putting the link in the chat so that y'all can check this out. You can pick a state and see where your cooperative stands up. And this scorecard was developed by organizations from 7 southeastern states. And y'all, these are the scores. Yes, the average scores for the states covered by these scorecards. Not good. Not a single passing score. And I'm sorry to say that my home state has the lowest. In fact, for Alabama, which has 22 rural electric co-ops serving over 1 million people, that's roughly 1/5 of our state's population. They cover more than 70% of Alabama's land area and have more than 71,000 miles of power lines. But we have the lowest scores overall in the Southeast. This is largely due to the lack of democratic governance and transparency. We desperately need to change things that are like high fixed fees and a scarcity of community solar. In fact, the one bright spot in all this was that our rural broadband is expanding. That was one bright spot in an otherwise dismal picture for Alabama. But let me step back for a second and let Chris talk about more from his perspective.
Thanks, Kyle, for teeing that up. I was thinking about when we were asking, what does it mean to be a co-op member? The first and most important thing is to know that you are one, right? To know that you own the place. When I was a co-op member, I didn't know. And now that I pay an IOU, I wish I was a member. So the next slide talks about our process. I'll just run through it real quick. We've determined our priority criteria by convening our partner orgs and stakeholders and figuring out what is the most important things. What are the most important things to us? What matters to us in governance? What matters to us in programs? Then we did the research. Y'all did a little bit of it yourself and know that it's not easy. You can look at websites, bylaws, corporate tax returns like 990s, and oftentimes we had to make direct phone calls. Then we did the math and did the scores, made the graphics and designed the promo materials and the websites. We gave the co-ops time to respond to our numbers and fact check us and correct us if we missed something. And we tried to do some double checks on our own. And then we did a lot of work with the media and with our partners to make the release of the score and the rubric and the information. And so the next slide talks a little bit, right, about how did we get to the priority criteria. And that is a really interesting conversation that helps you figure out together what is important to you and makes you think about some things, some questions that you hadn't thought about before. We started with a big list. We tried to whittle it down to things that we could easily verify, easily document, and easily find. And then to minimize the amount of phone calls that we would have to make. And then we divided those criteria into two categories with roughly 30 questions or criterion in total. So we focused in right on the categories of governance and member services.
And
so the next slide talks, go ahead.
Oh, Chris, Chris, this is Bria. I was wondering if you wanted me to skip ahead to the metric slide and then come back to the outcomes.
Sure, that's great.
Okay. Let me do that. This is just a zoom in on those scoring criteria.
Yeah, I included a little bit from the actual website that gives you an idea, a flavor of how we had to sift through the priorities that matter to us. For instance, community solar was really important, but there's lots of different ways to do community solar. And so you could see that we wanted to give folks lots of ways to score points. And even when it came to efficiency financing, we recognized that a loan program was better than no program. And we wanted to make points there. And so if this conversation, to Erik's point, was happening in the Midwest, we might have landed in a totally different place. So yeah, we'll bounce back to the other slide. Thanks, Bree. And so just cover some initial outcomes and some long-term outcomes and make way for the rest of the presenters. We got good press coverage, and that's routinely the case if you do this job well. We started conversations between stakeholders and cooperatives that continue to this day. We got some member owners activated and some member owners reactivated. And that's always a great thing. And then we got other partners involved in thinking about what's important about co-ops. And then on the long term, we are learning that we can sustain the conversation if you can update the scorecards regularly. And then you can use those scorecards and outcomes to decide what you want to change about your co-op in your place and how to target the campaigns that are needed for those changes. And so I want to thank you all for your time and attention and turn it over to Erik again to talk about another case study that actually came before ours and inspired it.
Thanks, Chris. So in Minnesota, so just to give you all kind of a sequence of how these scorecards happen. So the very, very, very first scorecard was done by our friends in Northern Plains Resource Council in Montana, who did a scorecard in one of their on one of their info sheets years ago. And when we saw that in Minnesota, we took that concept and turned it into a website that used to be a standalone website and is now on Cure's website, and I can link you in the chat to see the full copy there. So Cure's report card takes a look at the transparency practices of Minnesota's 44 different distribution cooperatives. And we took a look at them over a course of very limited criteria. We wanted to just only take a look at the information that they were presenting on their websites. Our thought was that because it is the 21st century, we should be having our co-ops presenting information in a 21st century style, is something we expect from most other types of cooperatives and other types of organizations. So we took a look at those at several different criteria, and what we did was took a look at them on either a yes or no basis. It's the whole conversation around cooperative governance and around transparency is a big one, right? And especially for people who are not, or for a lot of the general public who are not necessarily aware of what a cooperative is, or even if they're a member, that might be a big, we thought that would be a big thing for them to try and figure out with just a scorecard. So we did yes or no. And we released the first one in 2018. We took us a lot of research and double checking and triple checking to make sure we were giving correct scores. And we released the first draft of it, or the first copy of it, all the way back in the fall of 2018. And it was fun to see some of the reaction that we got from folks in the cooperative world. We kind of strategically leaked that we were going to be publishing it a day or two before we actually did. So as the final release period was coming, we were watching several different co-ops kind of actively updating their websites in real time, so they could have a better score. So could I get the next slide, please?
Yeah, sorry, Eric. I accidentally paused the screen share somehow, and I'm trying to get back on it.
Oops.
One moment.
But so what we found, just based on the initial reactions, some co-ops had a really strong reaction, and some co-ops did not respond at all. But we know that on a regular basis over the following years, that it was a regular topic of conversation in many co-op boardrooms across Minnesota, thinking about how they could improve or redesign their scorecard, or their website, to get a better score on the scorecard. So we've done several rounds of updates to the report card now. We're already 7 years after the original publishing time of this website, and every single year we've seen significant improvements from co-ops, and we've even gotten to the point where during our last update we emailed all of the cooperatives in advance, and we asked them to self-report, and the vast majority of them were so enthusiastic about wanting to improve their score on the report card that they responded very quickly. So it's been a pretty cool evolution over the last 7 years to see us driving better transparency through co-ops. Could I get the next slide quick here? We also, to do that, we kind of also added the kind of yay you did it parts of our report card. So every time we do an update, we celebrate the co-ops who have improved the most. When we started this, some co-ops had a barely functioning website, and if you see a couple of those, they've improved out of 10 possible criteria, they added 8 or 9 more. So some of them made pretty big leaps and bounds just over a couple of years. And we, of course, celebrate our perfect scores as well finally, one thing that we found really important was being able to create kind of locally specific cards that member owners can print out when they're talking to their friends and neighbors. So just as an example, we have one for my home co-op here that is kind of attached inside of the scorecard, or our scorecard. So people, if they live in that territory, they can print out that specific little page and they can show it to their member owners. Either, if they're not doing so good, they can tell everyone, hey, we need to improve this. Or if they're, like my good friends at Candio High Power Co-op, they can say, hey, look how great we are. Isn't it cool? We're really transparent. So that's a little bit about our process, and happy to share more with you as time goes on. But I think I'm turning it over to Deborah now.
All right. If you can see, give me a thumbs up, somebody.
Yep, we see it. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So, I think you guys did a great job with your presentation. We did not have the capacity to do a lot of the work ourselves. So we actually contracted a professor from Emory. She and her graduate students pulled all the data together for us. And then we had a graphic artist in Japan who actually designed the template for the scorecard. So this particular scorecard is interactive. My name is Deborah Opie. I work for Georgia Conservation Voters Education Fund. We released our scorecard in December of 2022. So in the state of Georgia, we don't call our EMCs rural cooperatives. They're called electric membership cooperatives. And in the state of Georgia, we have 41 EMCs. Our co-ops serve approximately 4.4 million Georgians out of 10 million residents and 73% of the state's land mass. Our EMCs have employed more than 6,000 workers and operate with the largest distribution network in the state with 194,867 miles of electric power lines. So when we look at our scorecard, everything that you see in yellow got a score of C. Everything in orange got a score of a D, and everything in red actually failed. So what I want to do today is I want to pick on my EMC. I actually am a member owner, and my EMC is Greystone. So initially, I thought that my EMC was a great EMC because I got my capital credits every year. But when I actually looked at the scorecard and began to go through the scorecard, I realized why they scored a D instead of a B at least. So my EMC has over 133 members, and it serves, 7 counties. And we actually ended up with a score of a D. We have 3 categories: overall democratic governance, finances and compensation, and member programs and services. The first 2 categories, the data was taken directly from the bylaws, whether they were posted or not. The third category, member programs and services, is more subjective. We actually reached out to member owners across the state. We provided them a list of questions. They made the phone calls, and we recorded the results of their answers. We are looking towards the end of the year to kind of shore up that third category with sending out a survey to member owners so that when we relaunch the scorecard or update the scorecard, that the member programs and services will have the added weight of the survey responses. So when we look at, let me start back up here, the way the scorecard is laid out, and we share this not only with the members, the co-ops, we share it with member owners. We put together a group of member owners that actually sit on a committee. The name of the committee is People Empowered for Clean Energy in Georgia. So we actually study the scorecard. We break it down, we discuss it, and the member owners actually identify issues within their scorecard. In the scorecard based on their EMC and also the EMCs in the state of Georgia that they would like to address. So we have a link to the area services map, the website, and the bylaws. So when we click on democratic governance, you see Greystone scored a 12 out of 44. The meetings are not open. You're not allowed to speak. The calendar is not available on the website. There are no minutes. It's not transcribed or uploaded to the website. This is one of the biggest problems that we've seen across the board in the state of Georgia, is that there is no information, contact information for any of the board members. There's no email, no phone number. You just get a nice picture, and you're lucky if you get a bio. So one of the things that makes this scorecard unique is if you click on open meetings, you have your little graphic here, but it also tells you what the expectation should be. No matter what category you click on, it tells you what the expectation should be. So a lot of the work that we try to do grassroots requires member owners to be participants. And it is important that we equip them with the knowledge, the tools to feel confident and competent when they are having these conversations, not only in community, but when they're having it with key members of their EMC, the staff. So we talk about democratic governance. We talk about finances and compensation. Is there any information about the 990s? It was not posted. It's supposed to be posted. I think the last one they posted was from 2019. My EMC does really good with capital credits. We got a 4 out of 4. Let's see what else. Salary, we got 0 out of 6. So when we look at this scale here, how much is the board being compensated? And it has to be based on the average member household income for Georgia. And it's $73,671 for the average income in Georgia. And then again, when we talk about the member programs and services, one of the things that really is important for us is, let's see, there's an opt-out. Here we go. Pesticide spray and opt-out. Greystone got 2 out of 2. It allows member owners who have Greystone equipment on their property that they have the right to opt out of Greystone maintaining the debris or maintaining the equipment by getting rid of the debris and spraying. So if you have equipment on your property, you have no idea what chemicals they're spraying on your property. If you have kids, pets, or animals that eat or graze or play in that area, you have no idea what they're spraying. So with the opt-out policy, you and your neighbors can decide that you want to maintain the area around the equipment and opt out of pesticide spraying. That ends my presentation, and I will turn it back over to Bree.
We just wanted to go over a few lessons learned from all of these projects. And the first lesson learned being it's great to start early with a focus on best practices and metrics for the scorecard projects. These can become really big. There's a lot of questions that people have about their co-ops and priorities that member owners and organizations have for their co-ops. So there's a lot of things that you might want to score. Some of them can be somewhat subjective, but there are a few best practices that are outlined in different places to follow. Getting different stakeholders in agreement can also take a long time. Doing that at the top so that you're not constantly revisiting scoring metrics and the scoring process itself is good. So try to get agreements at the top before you start doing all the research. Minimizing the number of people that are calling the co-ops directly is another good lesson learned from this process. A lot of the co-ops, start to wonder who's calling me and what is this about once they start getting phone calls with questions about their governance or the services they're providing to members. It can just help to streamline communications and have a common message that's coming from one person, by keeping the phone calls down to one person making them. Having a plan for how to engage member owners after the release is also really important. Doing a scorecard takes a lot of work. There's a lot of capacity needed from many people to do the research, to make the plan, to do the research, and then, to build a website if you need that. So you want to use that, you want to use all the effort that you put in to doing the scorecard project. So it's good to have a plan for how you're going to use it to engage member owners. You can also use them to target campaigns, which Deborah was talking about and some of our other presenters had touched on as well. So they're a good tool, and it's good to plan ahead for that. Also, making the scorecard simple can really help, especially with if you're an organization or a group of member owners and it's your first time doing a scorecard, keeping it simple can make it go a lot faster. Erik showed the scorecard from Cure, which had a limited number of questions, and they were looking specifically for information and whether or not it was available on the co-op's website. That kind of research can go a lot more quickly than questions that require you to look into the bylaws or the 990s or get more complicated. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do the more complicated scorecards, but particularly if you're just starting it out, simple could be the way to go. And then finally, updating your your scorecard multiple times can actually result in changes from the co-ops. And Erik talked about that a bit too. Regular updates can generate responses from the co-ops. They start to pay more attention. Often the first time your scorecard comes out, folks feel pretty grumpy about it. But if you can showcase how these scorecards can be a tool that is sort of rewarding to the co-ops as well, it gives them an opportunity to show that, outside or groups of member owners or nonprofit organizations think that their policies are good. That can be a real incentive for the co-ops to respond. So consistency there can be really helpful. And I will stop there, allow any of my colleagues here to add to these lessons learned if I've missed anything. And then also I think we can start taking questions.
All right. I think we're just about at time. Thanks for everybody for putting some contact information and ways for people to follow up in the chat. We have another session next week. We're going to be focusing on rural electric cooperative sustainability, affordability, and reliability. For this session, we're going to hear about various different forms of rural electric cooperative infrastructure to be kind of supporting this larger transition, modernization of electric co-ops. There is a link in the chat for that session. I think also, thank you for dropping that in there. And Aaron, once again, if you want to stay up to date, connect with other folks that are participating in this series, and get all of the recordings, the slides, and a transcript of this session, we'll be posting that to Canvas within the next week or so. And there's a link in the chat for that as well. And until next week, take care of each other.